Gospel reading is taken from the Gospel of John, chapter 10. Jesus said, "I tell you the truth. The man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice." Jesus used this figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore Jesus said again, "I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who ever came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ." At our local garage shop, there's a notice at the door which explains how we should now shop. There's instructions about safe distancing, there's a one-way system around the shop itself, and there's a limit to the numbers of people able to access the shop at any one time. It's all there to protect our safety and that of those serving us. The Gospel of John this week tells the story of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, the Good Shepherd of the sheep. And our reading explains, it lays out the ground for that story. Jesus is speaking of himself not just as shepherd, but also as the gate itself, the gate to the sheepfold. Gates work in two ways, as way in and way out. In this passage, we hear of how Jesus protects his sheep by keeping them safely penned in, shut into a place that protects them from the harm and the dangers of being stolen or being lost. And you'll probably recognise the similarity of that image as it's being played out in our own current situation as we seek to protect ourselves in lockdown, shut into our homes for our safety, restricted in our movements as we enter shops, as we enter medical centres, as we go to workplaces. The entrances, the exits are monitored for our safekeeping. And it's in this period of restriction of movement, restriction of physical contact with others, restriction of worshipping together, and a host of other limitations that we might reflect on how our lives can become isolated, and with the consequence that we can become lonely. Some of our freedoms have been stolen from us by this pandemic, and we have to cope for a season with a different and less wholesome way of being. For those penned in physical walls of their dwellings, some with lively children, some caring for elderly relatives, some with the worry of those who are unwell, the pressures can feel immense. But a gate works both ways, and Jesus speaks about how he is both the route in to safety, to salvation, and the route out to find pasture and to find life in all its fullness. Our one possibility for exercise each day can feel like a new freedom, can't it? Where the door is thrown open to allow us access to the great wide world outside. Even the opportunity of standing on our thresholds on Thursdays to clap our carers feels like a door opening to a new world, to new adventures, fresh pastures. We're discovering neighbours we never knew we had. At the moment, life probably feels, for most of us, far from the abundance spoken of by Jesus. The word used here actually means a superabundance and an uncontrollable wildness, far from the restraint we're being called upon to exercise in our limited journeyings. Unable to wander on walks or travel distances to visit family or friends, we may only dream of what living life to the full might look like in the future. Some of us may be fearful about peering beyond the threshold of our homes at all, and we're struggling to see a time when the lockdown will be lifted and life can return to normal. Many are talking about what normal will look like in the near future. Will we ever return to what was? What will it take for us to move out from the safety of our homes into the new normal? Jesus speaks of the shepherd who calls his sheep by name and leads them out to pastures that will cause them to grow and to flourish. He is known by his voice. The sheep hear him and respond because they recognise this is someone they know and who knows them. This Sunday marks Vocation Sunday. It's a day when we encourage people to think about what hearing God's voice might mean. A vocation is a sense of call, responding to an inner voice, seeking purpose, meaning, resulting in personal growth and development, and finding that fulfilled in a particular job or task. Often we hear vocation used most frequently as a call to ordination. However, I believe God calls us to a whole variety of roles which are needed in the world and in the church for it to be able to function fully. Listening to the voice of God is about finding a fulfillment of our own deepest desires as we delight in him and he in us. We see that in the Psalms, in Psalm 37 in verses 4 and 23. I wonder how you are finding this time of being penned in. Is it giving you space to listen to God's great delight in you? I hope so. Are you discerning his call to you? Don't forget that you can be in touch with Sue Rose, our vocations team leader, and her team through phone, through email, to talk more about what God might be saying to you. Last Friday, I was able to take part in a Zoom call, a conversation with some of our church head teachers. Just as we have appreciated our health workers showing their huge commitment to their vocation each week as we've clapped them on our doorsteps, so I've been thinking of some of our teachers in a similar fashion. That same commitment to care. During lockdown and over the Easter break, and often at weekends too, we've seen our schools remain open to families of key workers, to vulnerable children, and they've gone far beyond the call of duty to ensure that families have been fed. They've encouraged local and national leaders through their cards and messages. They've even produced PPE equipment because they know how to do that. They have technology. The national vision for church school education is to be found in these words from John 10:10. It's a desire that our children should know life in all its fullness, not merely through education, through knowledge, but to discover wisdom and hope, aspiration, dignity, respect, as well as finding how we can live well together. From what I'm hearing in the conversations I'm having, our children are finding that although life is restricted in many ways, they're also learning new skills and finding life opening up in new ways. Our school teachers are seeking to ensure that that is possible not just for the privileged few, but for all our children. Learning about God's world with wisdom and skills, finding hope and the promise of a better life, reaching out to others and caring for ourselves, finding a dignity which respects others' values. These attributes begin to depict what a world full of life might look like. We see it imagined again in our Acts reading today, which speaks of that early church that discovers something of sharing life communally together. We are penned in at the moment, rightly so, to protect our lifeline workers. But this will not last forever. Spring will come. We shall emerge, and I suspect that we shall be much more aware and appreciative of our freedoms. And I pray that we shall also experience a greater fullness of life in the one who died and rose from the grave. For not even death could lock him down.